A bachelor's of engineering with my stream is mechatronics engineering. I'm in my 5th year, but I'm doing part-time.
Okay. And what is your campaign color and slogan?
My campaign color is blue and my slogan is Victor's Vector.
And who is your campaign manager?
My campaign manager is Jessica Tram, she, her pronouns.
Okay. What is your favorite USU outlet?
Gotta be honest, these days, I don't really eat at USU outlets, but if I had to pick one, probably the one that I go to the most would be, I hate to say this, but the ABS Cafe. I hate to say this, but yeah.
How would you describe your politics?
Left, very much left. In terms, I think the funny thing for me, the older I get, the more left-leaning I get. Just how the saying goes, you can't be a conservative if there's nothing left to conserve.
Cool. And what do you think being left-wing means in the context of USU?
In the context of USU, being left-leaning means that the USU, it's recognizing first that the USU is a political organization. I think we see a lot that, I think there's this narrative that USU and Stupol in general shouldn't be political and it should focus on quote-unquote the needs of the students, but I really don't see how you can decouple the two things. The needs of the students, it's inherently political. So for example, when it comes to say, one thing I can think off the top of my head is the cost of living crisis, really, right? I volunteer for Food Hub, and Food Hub is one of my major policy platforms. You look at that and then you have some people that just say, oh, we shouldn't, the other side is literally students should starve. For me, there is no other side from being left-leaning.
What inspired you to run for USU?
I think for me, I'm on the SRC this year and I've been in the SRC last year, and obviously that's informed a lot of how I think about campus politics. I think with the USU, it's simply just a lot more reach than the SRC does. If you just looking at the staff funding, it's over triple that of the USU, and when new students come to university, the USU is front and center with the Welcome Fest, and the SRC is just that one stall. Not to belittle the SRC, because obviously I love the work that they do and I'm proud to be part of it. But as I think, for me, what I really thought about when I think about the USU is I think we need a lot more left-leaning candidates on board. And over the past couple of years, I think we've done well with that, with switch candidates, Cole from engineers. So we need a strong left-wing presence on the USU, because the USU has this reach, and if we on the left don't do anything about it, it's going to fall to hacks from the Liberal Party, people that are there just to garnish their CVs and so on.
Yeah, and so there are 10 other candidates running this year. What do you think make your campaign different from others?
I think also it's one thing that makes my campaign a little different is just being an engineers for SRC. Before Cole, I'm fairly certain the last engineering director was over 10 years ago before Cole. And then I had a chat with Cole about this, and apparently before him, the last engineers president was in the 1980s. There's just this lack of awareness. I know we bring it up at every single for USU and SRC, our talking point is there is just a lack of awareness and a lack of engagement when it comes to STEM students in student politics. And I think it's still true, right? Because these days when I'm in P&R and I talk to my peers and they're oh, how's that going? And they don't really know that much about what's going on. And I think there's a lot that's been done for transparency, but I also think you can have transparency, and the minutes are published, Cole releases his president's report, there's annual reports out and so on. But I think also there has to be the other side of, you have to engage the students, you have to actually ask them what they want. You have to be very willing to, be very able to rapidly gauge the needs and wants of students.
Why do you think it's important that student organizations like the USU reach out to STEM students and engineers specifically?
For me, it's because I think I'm going to first color it with my personal experiences, which is that when I first started university in 2018, 2019, for a lot of it, I really didn't care about student politics. It's the classic experience of your first day at university, you're accosted by Socialist Alternative asking you what you think about Marxism, and then you have the classic campaign seasons for each semester up and down Eastern Avenue, and I just didn't want anyone to talk to me. I didn't care. And part of it is I also spent so much time on the other side of campus where not a lot of campaigning is there. There's not a lot of resources for my first couple of years, I didn't know what, say, the SRC would be able to do for me. I didn't know there was a caseworker service, a free legal service. There's just not a lot of outreach to that part of campus. And like, I think that feeds into a lot of why STEM, particularly in engineering, like we're not as engaged in student politics. I think it's important because there are these services that are these things that the SRC, like for example, casework, legal, the USU have food hub. Like I think there are so many things that like are such benefits to students, and I think we should also just be a part of these student unions, because VSU and all that, there's like this increasing want to corporatize our university experience and make us passive consumers, and I think we should like push back and fight back against that. Engineering is in STEM is just such a big part of the university in general, right? Like in the Engineering Undergraduate Society, SUA, is, I believe they're the largest registered USU organization by membership count. So it is like vitally important that we actually reach people on that side of campus, really.
What do you think, or what sort of stances should USU take with activist actions that take place around campus? Maybe it might be like the NTU strikes and other activism.
I think the USU should absolutely stand in solidarity with the strikes. I think last year, like we shouldn't repeat what happened last year with like when the board voted unanimously to shut down the USU on the days of industrial action, and then Andrew Mills wrote an email saying, "Oh, that's what the board thinks, not what the USU thinks." So I really think we should not have that happen again. I think in cases like those, staff that would have been working on days of strikes should be paid, even if they're not there. And the USU should stand in solidarity with the staff.
Are there any other activist stances do you think the USU should take? How much do you think USU has a role in activism?
I think in terms of activism, the other stance, I'll bring on to the other stances. I think a very big one for me is disabilities. Like disabilities is something very close to my heart. And I think in particular, like what I've been seeing, like getting involved with the Disabilities Collective, is that there's such a lack of like for example, what can happen is like student leadership training in terms of disabilities awareness and sensitivity to disabled students. That's something that the USU should definitely mandate for clubs and societies executives. And just in general, I also think that the USU should have firm commitments to helping disabled students with disabilities wherever possible. For example, and I think a big part could just be like the commitment to hybrid learning. Like I know that like the USU isn't able to directly like pull the levers of control, so to speak. Like they're not able to directly say go to the Senate or the academic board and say you guys have to do this, but it is a very powerful message if the USU is able to, as an entity, say we stand behind a firm commitment to hybrid education, or we stand behind the fact that hybrid education benefits like the most disadvantaged students, like low SES, disabled, so on.
What do you think the most important benefit the USU can offer students?
I think the most important benefit the USU can offer students is that I think I think the way the USU positions itself is it's like the front and center of student life on campus, right? They dub it, what do they call it? The heart of uni life. So as like the front and center, like it should be a place where students feel safe and students feel like their voices and concerns are being heard. So like I think so for example, say I'm trying to think of a good example to illustrate this, but yeah, like I think so it like comes back to like it should be the place where students like can make their needs and wants heard. I know we have the SRC for this, and there should be cooperation in these matters. So I think one thing that it could do is, for example, when like certain things come up, like for example, university senate decisions or bills or any sort of government, state or federal bills that can have impacts on students, like the USU and the SRC should cooperate to have an email referendum or just a quick poll. Like the USU has like these, and the SRC, they both do these newsletters. And I think like it's important that they quickly reach students and gauge exactly what students want and need to be able to represent and advocate for their behalf.
You talk at length about the USU's transparency issue. What do you mean by that, and what steps would you take to try and remedy this?
So with the transparency issue, I think like there have been steps being taken. For example, meeting minutes being published, the president's report being published each month, and so on. But I think, touching on what I said earlier, it's like you can have this transparency, but also like with just being transparent is not enough. Like you have this transparency now that it's out there, students can read all this. Now what? So I think you also have to have the other part of, once you have this transparency, how do you engage students, and how do you gauge what students need and want? And so I think this is like where it can come in with the ideas of just email referenda on topics that are quite near and dear to that will affect students greatly. And an idea that I had in the back of my head is that this could just be rolled into the USU app, that there could just be a section that says, how do you feel about such and such? Or it could be like a temperature check that says, do you feel that you're being adequately represented by USU board directors, SRC, counselors, and so on, right? I think there has to be that other step of engaging students once you have this transparency. Students should vote for me because I am proudly left-leaning, and I would fight for what is right for students, and I would listen to students and what students need above all else. Also, go STEM.